All right, welcome everyone. Welcome to the Ask Me Anything panel about aggregation. This is where you can get your questions answered live by a panel of MongoDB engineers, product leaders, and other experts. So starting here to your left, we have Paul Doan. He is a solutions architect at MongoDB, handling technical pre-sales. He is also the author of the book Practical MongoDB Aggregations, where he provides an informed, opinionated view about aggregations. Next, we have Asia Kamsky. Asia is affectionately known as the principal know-it-all at MongoDB. She has held multiple roles here over the past 10 years, including as a developer advocate, principal engineer, principal solutions architect, and principal product manager.
I'm very principled.
Next, we have Cal Suarez. He is a lead engineer on the query team at MongoDB. He is responsible for writing the code for receiving, executing, and optimizing a user's query of their data. So welcome our panelists today.
Hello.
Thank you, thank you. We know that we are all that stands between you and whatever parties or happy hours you got invited to before the official party at 8 o'clock. So, but if you don't ask us questions, we're gonna have to make up questions.
Our first question is coming from Timothy. Badly.
Thank you for being here. Imagine a blockchain requiring big int. So we need 256-bit integers for compatible chains. Right now, BSON does not support big int. We need to be able to do queries, aggregations, even basic queries. And if we store that as a string, so far it seems like we can't do the aggregations or queries we need. What would you recommend?
Kyle? Actually, it's really funny because yesterday, late last night, early this morning, somebody pinged me with a reference to because there was a request for the big int, and said, "What's it?" I said, "I've not heard anybody request that before, so I guess that's why there's no Jira ticket."
Was it you?
Was it you? It was not. Interesting. I was from SIG, so I assumed it was from one of the Southern California customers.
Did you see how she's buying time here?
No, but it's true. I can show it to you. It's on my phone still. I totally dismissed him. I'm like, nobody else has ever asked for this.
So currently in MongoDB, we have native support for int32, int64, and decimal 128. So big int, this is 256. I think currently, like, you'd have to work around it by decomposing the integers into like two separate parts, and then like understanding like, okay, this integer represents like the upper, like, for example, if you did it in decimal 128, like one represents the upper half of the 128 bits, and then one of them represents the lower half. This obviously doesn't have like the ease of use that you'd want for like native like 256 support.
You're saying they should do that in their application?
Well,
shouldn't we do that for them?
Well,
in
yes.
Our
so like,
side?
I'm just saying that like we currently don't have
Right.
like that built-in native capabilities today. It's totally something that we can consider. So I can add it to my feature
But
request
I gotta
list.
say that it would require a new BSON type, which means we'd have to version all the indexes, which means that it would have to do all the work we did when we added decimal 128 in 3.4.
It's definitely work, but it's definitely something that is in the realm of possibility.
Right.
But I would say
it's
like,
not an impossible request.
so for now, I would say the best way to do it is to do some decomposition of the integers. It's not as like, it's obviously not going to be as fast as native support, but it's definitely possible.
Candidate for an example for your next.
All right, next question.
Third row over there.
Hello. Yeah, my question is quite specific about deleting documents in Mongo and if aggregation pipeline can be used for this. So for example, let's imagine I want to implement a cleanup strategy, cleanup rule. I have a large collection and my documents are versioned. And sometimes, let's say, I have a document that has 1,000 versions and I would like to impose some kind of limitation to keep last 100 versions of each document.
So basically,
So-
you're asking how you could.
Yeah, or is
delete-
aggregation pipeline the
Yeah.
solution, or can be a solution for this, or I should use something
Yeah, I'm
else?
going to jump to a conclusion here and assume that I know the answer here, even though I'm not 100% certain that this will fit your use case. But it sounds like you want to express the documents you want to delete in a way that requires analyzing the entire collection. Right? So you can't just say delete all the documents version 0 through 7 because you only want to delete version 0 through 7 if you have version 8 through 107, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So you want to find for each
For
document
each
the
document,
oldest.
yes,
right.
yes, the
Yeah,
last
so-
100 versions, let's say. Or
Good news, you can already do that today if you're not sharded. And
I
if
am
you stop all the
sharded.
rights to your system. Because basically you can find all the documents you want to keep and use $out to write them to the collection with the same name, which will essentially rewrite the collection with just the documents you want. The reason that I'm laughing is because, of course, it's not a real solution for two reasons. One is you might be sharded and we don't yet support $out to a sharded collection.
We do now.
What, in 6.0? It made 6.0?
Well, we're
No, we do
planning.
dollar
It will.
merge.
Coming.
We will.
It's
yeah.
coming.
See, engineers sometimes forget when they're working on something. It's a long way from being in your hands, but it is coming. The other thing, of course, is you can't stop writes. So as you're analyzing things, things are changing. So there ought to be a different solution. I actually think that this may be a use case for something that we considered implementing when we did $merge. The one where it's like you don't keep, there's an option that says if matched, replace, if not matched, insert, but there ought to be an option that says if matched, delete, or something like that. There's currently not a way to do that atomically in a single operation, but that's a clever idea.
What about, and I don't know the full use case, but what about doing an update on the ones that you match with some flag,
Yeah.
and then separately out of band, periodically or whatever,
Right.
coming and deleting those out that have that marker, like tombstone or
I
whatever you
presume
call
you're
it.
doing something like that now, with like a two-step.
Not yet. Yeah. I'm doing a kind of two-step. So the result of the aggregation pipeline, we can execute update in the same, like,
Yeah, it could do it.
inside the aggregation.
The last element of your pipeline could be a $merge, which is doing an update on the matched 100 or whatever,
Yeah.
setting an extra field or a flag on a field or whatever
Yeah,
to
it's
some
just-
value.
Either keep true or delete true, depending on how you write your aggregation.
Yeah.
So you could use aggregation to figure out which documents need to be deleted, and then just run a delete where keep false or delete true or whichever.
So the end of your pipeline that's doing the analysis can perform the update to set those flags on however many you want. But it's obviously slightly stilted because you've got to separately, out of band, come and do the cleanup.
But that would work.
Okay, thank you.
Just not in a single operation, two operations.
Thank
Other
you for the
questions?
question.
Cool. We're getting all kinds of ideas from this.
I'm really excited with the new columnar indexes that were announced. If we're going to be starting to look at some forward types of aggregations, such as forecasting, if those might be in the future within the aggregation framework, or some other more advanced types of aggregations, like data mining algorithms or things like that, would those would be possible?
What was the last one? Like
Like just some kind of like data mining algorithms, or like
dollar predict. Remember somebody did that for
Yeah.
Skunkworks?
dollar forecast, dollar predict. You can like, I can't think of like.
Charlie,
Yeah.
did you do that one? Do you remember who did dollar predict? Can't remember.
It's
Ship it.
So, I guess the great thing about like the columnar indexes is that a lot of some of you may have gone to Thomas Rucksteis's talk yesterday, where he was talking about OLAP cubes. This is the type, like, I'll be honest, like I don't know that much about like forecasting, but like any type of like workload that really focuses on, I need to analyze all of the data, but just one column, I think it will really unlock like just incredible performance benefits.
Yes. And that's usually like with forecasting, is that you're kind of taking a slice of the data, you need to grab a lot of it. And so if you can kind of, my understanding is that these types of indices will make that performance capability. So now that we have the performance engine, then it kind of begs the question, can we start bringing these types of aggregations into Atlas if that's on our roadmap now, where that might fall? Is it a possibility?
Maybe getting a little ahead of ourselves. Let's just roll out feature, see how it works.
Okay.
Thank you. Other questions?
Feel free to raise your hand during the previous question so Tonya will know which way
You, Mike.
to. Feel free to raise your hand while we're answering the previous question so Tonya will know which way she's going to head next.
Yeah, so this could be a dumb question indeed, but like if you take a typical example, like a customer has like an address collection within them and then orders within them, and the order details, we don't want to replicate the item details every time. We probably just use an ID within that, right? Just imagine a setup like that. Customer has address and customer also has an order as a sub-collection. Now there is a separate collection that has orders, the item details of the order. So if you need to write a query, like, who are all the customers from this region who bought a specific product? Is aggregation the best way to do that, or would you have to derive a secondary data structures or secondary indices to do that?
We'll make sure we understand the hypothetical data structure. You have customers, and they have orders, and customers have addresses, and the orders have those addresses as IDs?
Our orders have ID of the items that's being ordered, right? Like, whatever the articles
orders
that
have IDs. Oh, I see. Order has like an array of line items, which is IDs.
IDs for like
for
the
products.
details of the product.
Okay.
Yeah. We don't want to replicate the product details in every collection.
And then the query that you're asking about is for what?
Who are all the customers who bought a specific product from a given region, like based on address?
Based on address?
Yeah, I mean, a particular location, region, state,
Okay.
whatever.
Well, as somebody who's actually written a couple of e-commerce systems back in the old days and relational systems, I will tell you that we always put the address into the order because it can't be a foreign key. A customer moves and changes their address. You don't want to think that all of their old orders went to a different address than they actually did. So that's a case of immutable data. Once an order ships, that information is immutable and should be denormalized into the order. Coincidentally, that would help you make this query without worrying about doing any dollar lookups or anything else like that. Although I'm sure there could be an example of something that shouldn't be denormalized into the order.
Obviously, it was a hypothetical example, but there are similar situations. But your recommendation in such situation is to replicate, within, embed that within the order. In fact, a similar problem exists with the products, right? We don't want to replicate the product within every order because product detail will be distinct.
So one thing that, this might get touched upon in the keynote tomorrow is how fast, the technology and the costs of things change. Why not replicate certain information in a second place or third place if you're going to need it? The real problem sometimes, and when we get into the really complex aggregations, is when we don't know up front that we're going to need to query by something, so it doesn't occur to us that we should just save the product description right in the order, because later if a product description changes, like if I'm looking at my old orders, I kind of want to see what the description looked like when I ordered the thing. If you change the product description, I'll be confused because I don't remember ever ordering something called, Foo Bar because it was called Barbaz when I ordered it. But yeah, in extreme cases, you would use dollar lookup, or you'd make two queries, right? First, you look up something in one collection, and then you make another query of a second collection. I don't think that you need to change your schema because you find yourself writing a complex aggregation, unless you say, from now on, all of my queries are going to become these complex aggregations unless I denormalize some data or replicate some data into a second collection. Does that help? You guys have a different take on it?
No, I guess I agree with you. I mean, if you were taking orders on products, in an e-commerce situation, it's typical for the product catalog to change every day. And absolutely, normally you want your orders to capture a snapshot in time of those products because they may not actually exist. On the flip side, we don't know. You're talking slightly hypothetical. You can join two collections with dollar lookup. You probably do it a lot less often than you would relational, but if that's what you need to do, that's the tool you go to.
Okay, thank you.
Question right next. Oh no.
We follow order. You had your hand raised first.
All right. This might have a few parts, so feel free to let me know if there's anything I need to repeat. But imagine if you were trying to, and using geospatial data, look at a set of coordinates to create a polygon or a polygon. Are there any aggregations to create a random coordinate that would live in that polygon?
So yeah, like I think it might be possible for you, like for example, like that there's like I want the coordinate to be within these bounds. I don't think we have something like there's definitely no like native like thing that's like generate like random like points for me, but it's totally possible.
As you're itching away.
Is this a Ask Me Anything or Stump the Experts? Dollar Rand.
Yeah, so you can
So
use.
you could give it a range. I mean, you could create random points, and Dollar Rand is relatively new. I can't remember. Is it 5.0?
No, 4.42
Okay,
actually.
so there is a function that did not used to exist before 4.4 that would generate a random number. So you can give it a range. So now, if your range is certain latitude, longitude, I mean, you can give it a min-max in both directions. That won't actually take care of figuring out,
Okay.
right? Like you can give it a square, and it'll generate a random
So
coordinate essentially. in a
I wonder
square.
if you'd
I
have-
wouldn't call it a coordinate because it wouldn't be smart enough, right?
I wonder if you'd have to generate with dollar rand the x coordinate, the y coordinate, based on the square around that, and then work out if it actually still was within the polygon.
And then dismiss it if it fell into the corners, depending on the shape of the polygon.
Do we provide that in Ag? Because we have GeoNear in Ag, but do we have?
Well, dollar rand is just an expression.
No, within a polygon directly from Ag.
Oh, well, that's a different question, right? Because GeoNear queries from your collection whether you have any points that are within a polygon. Here, you might have to do your own within equivalent.
I feel like there's
What's the use case here? Are you just trying to stump us?
No, it's an actual use case. So we're trying to develop like a mini game, and I want to allow for user-generated content, so they can draw basically a polygon. We'll take that polygon, and we'll create options like GeoGuessr options based on the polygon they create.
Yeah, you know where my brain went? You know how when you have to prove that you're not a robot to a web page, they ask you to solve the stupidest things? Just give it to them as the problem. Draw a thing, then say, click anywhere within this, within this shape, and then use that for other players. Just make them do the work for you.
However, said that, I feel like isn't there a challenge there for us? There's homework. I'm tempted. I'll have a look at it.
Were there more parts to your question, or?
That's an interesting.
I will just.
All kinds of use cases we haven't thought of.
One thing that I just wanted to throw out for anybody using like MongoDB's like geo like features, one of the most frequently confusing things is people will say these two polygons should intersect, but they don't, and you must remember to choose the correct coordinate system, because depending on the coordinate system, a point and a polygon that would intersect in one geometry may not intersect in another. So just fun geo fact.
I had to answer a question like that in the forums once.
Sorry, your next question.
Next question.
Can we use aggregation pipeline across databases in a same cluster, and also does it work across the clusters?
So do you mean can you do a dollar union with or a dollar lookup into
dollar
another
lookup.
database?
Yeah, dollar lookup.
Kyle, when did you guys add that?
I have to check the release notes.
So it depends what version you're on, right?
So dollar lookup sharded came in 5.1 or 5.2, did it not?
And then did adding another database only come in the same as sharded support?
Oh.
Oh, it's
okay.
still.
I missed that.
Oh.
Yes.
So there's your answer. You can do a dollar lookup, but it's across collections. We don't allow you to reach across databases.
But it's
yet.
coming, right?
It's on the way.
And
Yes.
you now know who to hassle in a minute.
Yeah,
at the
yeah,
end of this
hassle that
session.
guy in the back.
And I will say that yes, it does, like in a sharded cluster, like it does work. Like you can, like you do an aggregation, and like we will correctly break up your aggregation pipeline. Some of it is executed on the shards that are targeted, and then when there's a merging portion, they'll merge together
Yeah.
to give you the final result.
Even though somebody earlier claimed that they were doing a dollar lookup and the data was all local, but for some reason it was slow. And I'm like, well, we don't know if it was slow because it was going to other shards unnecessarily, but we could check if they gave us the logs.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Man, this really is stump us.
Yeah.
I would have brushed up on the release notes if I'd known it was
Other
going to be so
questions?
challenging.
In an aggregation, if you use like select, for example, or like projection, I forget which one it was. Like if you select a subset of your data, does that make group go faster?
No.
No, it doesn't. So is it recommended to?
Yeah, but yes and no.
Okay. Is it because of like streaming or like is it?
So I think your question is, should you filter out certain fields? So remember this, group, when you define group, unless you're using $root somewhere, you're already telling it which fields you're going to use.
Okay.
So you don't need to tell it, oh, do this projection first, because it's going to do this dependency analysis, and it's going to say, okay, you're doing a group, you're grouping by field A, and then you're adding values of field B, and then you're pushing field C onto an array. It's only going to request those fields from the documents on disk. The only time that something else would happen is if part of your aggregation and group does something like push $root, which is the entire document, and then later you're going to be like, oh, but I didn't really need $root, I don't want these fields. Then you should do that projection, ahead to remove the fields you don't need.
So during like if you have like let's say each document is like pretty large in size, is it recommended to split like analytics information in a different collection versus like the bulk and meat of the document?
Maybe. It depends. It's like when you fetch a document, do you usually need all of it?
No.
Or do you usually need only? So if you don't read the data together, you probably don't need to store it together. But if storing it separately means half of your reads now have to use $lookup or be 2 reads instead of 1, then probably store them together, right?
Got it.
In MongoDB, everything is, it depends. I think there was a question up here in the front. See, now it turns out if we had 2 microphones and 2 MCs, then,
I'm happy to be
we'd
in.
save you a lot of walking.
I can.
the extra steps.
Okay, all right.
Good
Wasn't sure.
afternoon. One question. If we group on multiple fields in a pipeline, and afterwards we want to reuse or return the fields we grouped on at the root of the document level, is there a way of like exploding the _ID document after the group stage? And if
There
so,
is.
what is
Paul,
it?
don't you have an example like that in your practical aggregations book?
Yeah. Oh, thanks for the whatever.
No, I actually think I remember that.
Yeah. So, by the way, if anyone wants to check out the book, there's some flyers here to.
It's an
free
e-book.
online. Yeah.
So they're just flyers, not
Yeah,
the actual
yeah.
book. The
That's
book
the-
itself is on
It's the
online.
nearest it gets to physical. So when you group on something, the underscore ID is what you're grouping on, but straight afterwards in the pipeline, you can then say set some new field name, whatever you want the field name to be, the value of $underscore ID, and then you can unset underscore ID or do $$ remove on it. So
Yeah.
you're just post-processing. What you're saying is basically the output, if your group looks a bit ugly and I want to give it nicer fields, yeah, that's a pretty normal thing to do.
Yeah, usually what I would do is like group with a few fields in the underscore ID, but outside, still within the group stage, add the same fields with first of itself, and afterwards like remove the
then
underscore
you
ID
just project
from
out
everything.
the
Yeah.
underscore ID. Sure, yeah.
Is this still efficient?
Either way,
Yeah, yeah.
I'd be willing to bet significant amount of money that you would not be able to measure the difference in
Yeah.
performance in doing it these two ways.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah, pretty much all the same. Yeah.
We have time for a few more questions.
Few more.
Yeah, so another standard pattern, like we saw in another talk here, like you aggregate bunch of data and then call a function like average or something, right? So that's a built-in function. Is there a way to call functions that are not built into Mongo, meaning like, for example, like external routine? If that is not possible, can we call out to, let's make a REST call to a service that will do it whatever it needs?
Should we tell them that it's not a good idea?
You're pressing all Asia's right buttons here.
Yeah, man, I'm like, this is my greatest hits.
It's totally possible. So if you have client-side JavaScript enabled, which is on by default, there is a dollar.
You mean server side?
Or sorry, server-side JavaScript enabled, which is the default option. You can write a dollar function, and you basically just pass it, like like any arbitrary JavaScript code that it can execute, and so like it will.
Yeah, I think this was added in 4.4. We call them user-defined functions. So you can write your own accumulator, or you can write your own function in projection or anywhere that an expression is taken. It's just not going to be as fast as something you could express in aggregation native expressions.
Sorry, could you say it in the mic? I can't.
Calling a third-party library like a JavaScript
same.
node,
Like
JS
an
library.
external library, like
Yeah.
if you want to build, let's say, compute a Kalman filter, right? There's a pre-built routine JavaScript or something. So can we import it the way we do it in Node.js or something? Because it's not that every logic that we can handwrite it.
Like what kind of function? I mean, that's why you would write a JavaScript function there. Let's say you want to call MD5 or some other kind of hashing algorithm that's built into JavaScript, but not into, MongoDB expressions, right? I'm not sure what other functions there could be that.
There's a number of cases. For example, Kalman filter computation is one of the standard ones that we do, like for trend analysis.
If it's standard and available in JavaScript, then you can call it.
Not in like direct JavaScript. These are written in JavaScript, but you need to import those libraries usually.
In like a Node.js library that you want to pull in.
Kind of, yeah, right.
Yeah.
Like, is there a similar construct here that where we can
only allow
import
built-in
third-party
functions.
libraries
Yeah.
and call functions within it?
Yeah, I think right now we only allow built-in functions.
Yeah, it's only built-in functions right now.
Fair enough. Thank you.
What I would say is sometimes people will prematurely jump to the conclusion that they need to pull in a library or do some custom JavaScript code, and actually often there is an answer within the aggregation framework, albeit that's where it maybe gets a little bit more complicated. But I do get the use case as well. I guess it comes down to what is the real use case. Like, is it HTTP? You want to use a HTTP library for each one to call out to something else. That's probably not the right fit for doing server-side
You don't want to
analytics
rewrite that
anyway.
in ag
But yeah,
expressions.
it depends.
All right, last question. I think we got a couple of minutes left.
Is there still a 100 megabyte memory size limit for
That's
aggregation
it. Bingo.
pipelines?
So great,
Got
great
it, that one.
question. There's no such thing. There was never been a 100 megabyte limit for an aggregation pipeline. What there is a limit for is a 100 megabyte limit for an in-memory sort for a single aggregation stage.
Correct. That's what I was
So
asking
if you are sorting without a benefit of an index, or you are grouping, which is kind of a special case sort, and you would exceed 100 megabytes in memory, then we spill to disk if you told us in an option that it's okay to spill to disk. Now we're going to flip that option. Is that in future? It's not 6.0, right?
I think it's 6.0 where we
Is it
will
in 6.0?
we will
Yeah.
enable disk use by default.
Yeah, we're going to make it so that like we'll always spill to disk if you exceed, unless you explicitly tell us you don't want to spill to disk. There's also an internal parameter to increase that amount. But the question is why? Why do you want to have more than 100 megabytes used by a single aggregation stage when presumably on your system you have a lot of things running, and if each one of them takes up a few hundred meg, pretty soon you got an out-of-memory killer coming and killing the MongoDB process. Do you have a comment about that? There you go. Kyle to the rescue. 8 seconds left.
I just got a blank.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll ask again.
We'll
No,
come back to you
okay.
if you remember
We'll
it
come
when the
back.
pressure's off.
We'll chat afterwards.
All right, thank you to our panelists and thank you for the great questions. Everyone,
Yeah.
enjoy the party and we'll see you tomorrow at
Yeah, and
MongoDB
you know, feel
World.
free to come up and we'll chat on the way
There's
out.
flyers here
you
if
thought-
anyone wants a
'cause, you
flyer
know,
for the
I
book.
always think of a great question right after the session ends. So come on up. We'll probably think of a great answer.
You've
And
just
Paul,
thought of it
that's
as
a
well.
free ebook that they can download. Is that correct?
You can download it and they can see how to from here if they want to come and
Yep.
get it.
So grab a postcard and download
Yeah.
his
Thanks
ebook
for
come
coming
about
this late in the day.
aggregation.
Thank you, everybody.
See you at the
Enjoy
party.
the evening.
See you at the Builders Fest.